session, and we will use the questions you submit in our Q&A, in the Zoom Q&A window there, and Jonathan and Linda will be happy to field those because we know you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to, you're going to have a lot of things that you're going to want to ask for more information about coming up. So that's it. Now let me tell you a little bit more about our presenters. Jonathan Broadbent is a member of the North Region Chair, or excuse me, a board member, and is the North Region Chair, beg your pardon, of the Protect Ohio Children Coalition. That is a statewide grassroots volunteer organization dedicated to watching schools and school boards across Ohio, what they're doing and what they should be doing and perhaps shouldn't be doing. You can see the website there. It's protectohiochildren.net. I hope you visit that. LindaHarvey is the president of Mission America. She is also a board member of the Protect Ohio Children Coalition, and she is a Christian pro-family, or it is a Christian pro-family organization, Mission America is, tracking current cultural issues. She is also a radio host on a Salem station in Columbus, as am I in Cleveland. She's a writer and a speaker on social issues and education. Learn more about Mission America at that website, missionamerica.com. So, having said all of that, and after getting all of the gremlins out of our tech situation here, I would like to introduce and welcome Jonathan Broadbent and LindaHarvey, who are going to co-present this very important webinar on social emotional learning, replacing parents and indoctrinating children. Jonathan and Linda, thank you both for working through the Zoom issues with us. We appreciate you being here. Please take it away.
Delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Jonathan, maybe you can start out. Just give us. You're great at grandstanding and brainstorming. So I think you should just kick this off.
I like how you put that. It sounds much more friendly than bombastic. Yeah. So for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm often sort of thrust onto the stage. And I'm frequently the voice and face of Protect Ohio Children, just simply because, for no better reason, the fact that I'm a dad who got fed up in a local school district a year ago and was just bold enough to raise my hand and organize some people and start objecting. So Linda and I are going to dive in as fast as we can. This is one of those, just take a deep breath in, and we're just going to sort of rush into a lot of info in a really short amount of time. There's good news and bad news to share, mostly all good news, and I hope that you guys watching get a pen handy because we're going to point you in a lot of different directions, give you a tremendous amount of information. But just so you know what to expect, this is a little bit good cop, bad cop here. Linda is very organized. She's going to spreadsheet and show you like PowerPoints and stuff. The most I ever do is I get Post-it notes and put them in front of me. So I make sure to remember a few key points. But everything I'm about to say just comes straight from the heart and from experience. Linda, I don't know if you want to just dive into the PowerPoint you were good enough to put together.
Dan, do you have our PowerPoints for us?
I do. I have the one. Let's see here.
There's 5 of them. So let me just kick this off, and I'll start. Okay, and I'll start. And Jonathan, you just comment where you want to. Okay. So yep. We're gonna the big new concern. I mean, CRT, critical race theory, was on all of our minds in the past year. It still is. What we're finding is that overarching above that and all the other agendas is this strange animal that's been around for a while, but it's now just becoming a very popular educational fad, quite frankly. I think it will come and it will go, hopefully, but we need to kind of get hold of it while it's there. And it's social emotional learning. Basically, it's doorways to indoctrination and replacing parents so that the school becomes the parent. It isn't that lovely. So let me just overview here that social emotional learning is a framework. It's a sweeping ideology. It's been around for about 25 years, but only in the last 10 years has it gained traction. And schools are embracing this because it supposedly helps students manage stress, change their behavior to, better behavioral patterns, control their emotions, make responsible decisions. Who doesn't want that, right? but it's almost as if we were never doing any of that before. Schools have never done that. Well, think about that. No, of course we've been doing that. Schools have been doing that. It also serves as a doorway to propaganda. And it does so because it's highly general in its nature. And let's go to the second slide. So we'll just go, if you would, Dan, can you do that? Or do I do that?
Dan's going to need to do that. But actually, Linda, I'm going to interject there for reference. We're talking about material that's entering schools. I use the blanket term material because we get caught up with school districts if we use the term curriculum. This isn't necessarily curriculum we're going to talk about. What it is the blatant manipulation of terminology that is otherwise probably well accepted in society. You'll find examples of social emotional learning in psychology. I think that's where it probably has its roots, and it's not necessarily a bad thing in society. What it is people who wish harmful destruction, I'm just going to call it harmful destruction in schools, have hijacked the term and are using it for, we're going to make the case today, for very nefarious reasons. And Linda, just really quickly for our audience, before you get into the detail here, I always want to make a quick point of saying that folks like Linda and Protect Ohio Children Coalition, other organizations around the country, we make a point of getting into the minutia of this stuff, where it comes from, what its purpose is, how it's financed, who's backing it, who makes money off of it, all of that stuff. But as a key starting point, I suggest that everybody in every school district and every community should be asking themselves one fundamental question. And that even goes deeper than, does it belong in schools? And before that question, we should be asking ourselves, are schools doing their one job, the key one job that they have successfully, and that is education? If schools aren't succeeding at educating children, why are we considering any other stuff, good or bad? So I'm sorry, Linda, to step in. I thought that was going to be just a few seconds of comment, but I just want to put it in perspective before we get too far into the detail, because that can feel overwhelming, I think, to some.
Well, exactly, because you bring up a wonderful point. This segues into something I wanted to say. Yesterday, I went down to the Ohio State Board of Education's monthly meeting and testified during their public comment time. And I just generally brought up, they don't have an issue at this time. I brought up the issue of, let's reconsider and I'll tell you about it in a second, the Ohio strategic plan, education strategic plan that's based now on social emotional learning. Let's reconsider that, because basically what they're doing is they are embracing it's overreach and overreaction, and then it's opening these other doors. So I will share in just a moment about how that works in Ohio, because I think most of the people on the call are probably from Ohio. But nationally, okay, let's just start with this. SEL, social emotional learning, is broken down into 5 areas: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And these are called competencies. So do they sound general? Does this sound like nailing Jell-O to a wall? Exactly. However, the problem with these broad vision statements is that it gives lots of room for amateur psychology and for activists and activist teachers and school staff to start messing around with kids' minds, hearts, and values. So let's go to the next slide then. So SEL was adopted in 2019 by the Ohio Board of Education, and now it's administered by the Ohio Department of Education. And if you go Google Ohio Department of Education, social emotional learning, and you'll get all of this. And it's very detailed, except they're all general standards. Okay, we'll go through a couple and just show you how they can be quite manipulative in a moment. But it's part of the State Board of Education's strategic plan that embraces the quote unquote whole child. And that is a big, let's go back. The whole child. So no, we're back. There you go. Thank you. The whole child is, what I said to the folks yesterday at the Ohio State Board of Education is, under what authority are you taking charge of the whole child? You, as Jonathan said, and I ended up saying, we need to stay in our lane, folks. Until you've achieved 90th percentile proficiency in math and science, you have no business. I didn't say it that way. I was trying to be much nicer than I felt. But you don't have any business diving into, the child's emotions and his beliefs and his study habits and his anger management, and then what he believes about current issues. So it ends up, this is really, the cart is driving the horse. Academic achievement is falling behind in many schools, and this is becoming less of a priority. But what's happening is there's now big money all of a sudden behind SEL under the American Rescue Plan from the federal government. They specifically have, literally, I believe it is billions of dollars assigned, and then the states as well, for safe reopening of schools. And part of that is social emotional learning. And a lot of the manipulation is going on with the focus on kids who are stressed out, they're anxious, and why wouldn't they be? They've been shut up and masked for, a year and a half or 2 years here. And so they now have money. So now there's funding behind all of this, and it's going to become much more explosive, which is one of the reasons we have focused on it so much. The other big thing is that this tends to undermine the parental relationship everywhere you turn. They tend to say things like, we'll talk about this in a minute, surveys are a big part, and that's where we've heard at Protect Ohio Children, there's a place where you can log on and give an anonymous tip. And boy, do we have the anonymous tips. It's a wealth of information about what's actually going on the ground in Ohio schools. And I visited it at different points. And here's some of the stuff I found about, the surveys going on, that we have, all kinds of surveys by vendors like Panorama. Second Step is in there some places. And some of these surveys, not all schools will jump on the survey like this, but Panorama has, hang on one second. They have questions like, let me just give you an example of how they're going to undermine parental relationships here. They will regularly ask kids, sometimes they have them check in with their student IDs at the first part of the week or even the day, and they'll say, what emotion are you feeling today? Okay, you and your daughter just had an argument this morning on the way to school because you're grounding her until she cleans up her room. What is she going to reflect? And that's going to go in a data file, and it's going to stay with this child. Another question, Panorama, that schools can choose from these bank of questions. What emotion are you feeling today? What would you like to talk privately with an adult from the school about how you're feeling or something on your mind? Okay, let's talk about that. And so, Jonathan, jump in here.
Yeah, I've been commenting at the surveys for several weeks now. By the way, if you're not already involved in one of our groups, I suggest jumping into one of the Protect Ohio Children groups. They're very open. Even if you're listening in from out of state, you'll find a treasure trove of valuable information about things like these surveys, and will probably very likely also lead you to more local resources wherever you are in the country. We all interact a lot, Ohio and other states. The survey thing, I've been calling that the new gold. I think right now, that's probably the most valuable thing on earth. It's ahead of any of these cryptocurrencies or gold. It is being treated by powerful sources globally. Like this is San Francisco 1849. There's gold in them thar hills. The collection of data is rampant It's so prized. The money behind it is breathtaking and very harmful. And so just to sort of put a fine point on that, Linda mentioned, which one is it? The survey company, the Attorney General Merrick Garland's son-in-law. That's Panorama. Yes, Panorama is one of the leaders of that. Is our Attorney General's son-in-law, and just looking at that one little sliver of the pie, the millions of dollars that flow into that are awful and egregious. To collect data on children and their behaviors and create this data file that, as far as we are able to tell, is permanent. This is going to stick around forever. Unlike, we've all known that a police record disappears, a court case or something when they turn the age of majority. Our understanding is that these kids that fill out these things and express concerns and issues and stuff and their emotions when they're in kindergarten, that's going to be with them in this massive collected data file and used to who knows what, control, manipulate, sell to, market to. So the surveys jump on Protect Ohio Children, one of our groups, Facebook, Telegram. We're on several different sites and expanding. That's going to point you in the direction of great resources to know what you're looking at when you're presented with those questionnaires.
Right. So, the data is data mining is very possible because who knows who has access to that information from your child and the kinds of questions they're asking. And we had this from several schools already are coming up and giving us these tips and this information about the questionnaires that were put forward by, it can be Panorama. Sometimes there's a couple of names that come up as vendors where they are asking kids questions, and then in the questionnaire, and parents do not know about this ahead of time. They are told in general about the questionnaire, but the survey instrument is not given to them. They'll be asked about their sexual orientation or gender identity. And we've had that happen in a parent in the Berea schools was concerned about that. A parent in Beaver Creek down by the Dayton area. That was a big concern a year back. And so we have lots of those kinds of reports coming up around the state. And if you have that in your school, please go to protectohiochildren.net and let us know. And it's treated confidentially. These are anonymous tips, but give as much information and backup as you can. The other thing I would like for you to hear about is how does this work out as far as labeling of children? Well, here's a deal. A couple of years ago, this was in the state of Connecticut, a girl took a survey, and because she was kind of a very serious student, she did not socialize or party a lot, but she had never been labeled as anything but just a serious student. She was labeled by a staff member, a counselor who only met her in the hall, person she'd never met before. She was labeled both with having social anxiety disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder. And this greatly disturbed this child and this family. The parents turned around and sued both the vendor and the school, and they should have. So let's go to the other thing on this one slide, I just want to make sure, this is extremely important. One of the doors that is opened in SEL is that you must learn how to get along with others and people who are different from you. Well, how is that defined? It's usually defined by a way to undermine Judeo-Christian values, morality, and faith. But the other faith issues are presentations are usually pretty well established and promoted. So that's always the door that's opened that we have to watch for in SEL. So let's go to the next slide then. So, hey, Jonathan, you want to jump in here? So we got lots of agendas that are opened up by SEL.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the Yeah, Dan, if you can leave that up. Yeah, great. So the primary, the trifecta of evil, I'm going to call it, in schools that's seeping its way in from the far left is critical race theory, comprehensive sexuality education, and social emotional learning. Everyone sort of got caught up for a while in discussions of critical race theory. One of the great comments that I've heard about critical race theory, and really in the context of history, is that teaching history is the school's job. Teaching the moral context, teaching the moral context of history is the parent's job. That's a great key point and illustrates just some of the fallacy of the material that's entering. So as we look across the board, and each one of these is kind of its own rabbit hole that we could dive into, and we do regularly in radio broadcasts and online social media, et cetera. We're going to try to keep today's comments, we're going to brief. I know we're probably running out of time. So soon now, Bob or Dan are going to tell us that we're approaching Q&A. I'm going to try to make their comments as high level and brief as possible, starting with just the word bad.
Hey, John. Hey, Jonathan.
Bad. Yes.
Just to let you know, you guys do not have to shorten your presentation at all. The original schedule was to start Q&A around 8:30, but that's not carved in stone, particularly when we had a slow start because of our tech problems. So you guys please present until you're done presenting. I know everybody wants to hear everything you have to say before we do Q&A. So if we go past 8:30, feel free. You guys don't censor yourselves at all. We're good.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that, Bob. All right, so that's me. I'm on the mic. That means that everyone should get your phone and get Uber Eats and get food delivered, because I'm kidding.
You never want to tell Jonathan Broadbent, don't censor yourself. I mean, we'll be here till midnight.
Oh boy. My reputation precedes me. No, I will try to keep my comments really brief. Again, in understanding where this stuff all fits and how to communicate, because that's part of it. I view, anytime I have the opportunity to speak to a group like this, there's a part of my mind that goes to that key moment. If you guys have ever seen the movie The Patriot with Heath Ledger and Mel Gibson, Heath Ledger plays Mel Gibson's son, and at one point he goes into the church to try to get to rally people to go to fight. But that's my role. That's really what I view my opportunity to speak to people. I want to get people amped up. We're Protect Ohio Children, and I personally, we're not the ones that are going to go and show up in your school district and fight and win and conquer this stuff. We're the people who are ringing the alarm bell that there is poison being poured in the well. That poison is CRT, CSE, and SEL. The well is school districts. And just one other thing, I could get into the details on any of those at a moment's notice, because I've made it a point of becoming very well versed in what they are and where they come from and what their objectives are, the damage that they do, the harm they bring to society. But the most important thing that I hope people take away from this is that there are now, just in the past year, the resources that have come online to help communities, parents, students, to concerned teachers, to help organize against this stuff is astounding. If you just step into it and start taking a look, I believe two things. You're going to first find for yourself that you probably don't like it. If you're a concerned parent, you want good education for your children. You don't want them gender confused, racially antagonized, concerned and fearful of those who are religious. If you want to be rid of all that bad stuff, take a look at the resources that are out there. We're one of them, and right now we're very strong, very, very strong in Ohio, and have connections all over the country. But just get started somewhere. As I said at the beginning, when I first started talking, I started at zero. a year ago. I had no idea what any of this was. I just raised my hand and volunteered to fight back in a local school district. And it really just took off from there. And I was given the opportunity to volunteer. Linda, did you want to kind of go through the bullet points, and I'll chime in?
I will. And let me just give a little background about why I got involved in this. I was a parent here in the Upper Arlington schools, and about 20 years ago, I jumped in a big school board fight for a number of years. And with a number of parents here, we fought the beginnings of the homosexuality issue being presented in a favorable way and in a somewhat graphic and explicit way in novels in this school system. So that's where I sort of cut my teeth, and that made me realize, we have a lot of work to do, because the teachers themselves have become indoctrinated at the teachers' colleges where they go. They all come out basically with all of these progressive agenda items. Very few of them can survive without absorbing some of that. So let me just go through here. I want to jump to number 2 there and then go back to number 1. Just so you know, the Ohio Department of Education, which is a state agency appointed, the director will be appointed by the governor. So they have set these SEL standards, but schools, we are local control. So schools do not have to adopt those particular standards. I think some have gone very close to that, but every school system does its own thing. But this is again a standard. The way the Department of Education explains it, there's not going to be an assessment. So you now have other tests, state tests that you have to take. There won't be one for SEL. That's the good news. It's also the bad news. It makes them not bad news, really. These assessments are the tail wagging the dog so often, but it makes it very easy to slip in just about whatever is wanted at the local level, as far as activist teachers and people that have other agendas. And they are also, it's not a separate curriculum in most situations. They generally work this into the standards the school system adopts. They work it into what they're already doing, with a few surveys and a few extra activities on top of it. But the teachers will be evaluated to some extent on how well their students answer questions and respond on these SEL standards. A lot of it is bureaucracy over top what they've already been doing. So it's a little bit of, again, the nanny state. So let's just go back to the first part there. These agendas, let me just tell you what's happening in some schools right now. And this is, I think, very much influenced by the SEL standards, that you have to become socially aware, self-aware, and you have to develop relationship skills to get along with people that are not like you and have other viewpoints. Well, guess where that almost always leads? It leads to the adoption of progressive values. Right now, in several schools, I just heard from people in Dublin, the Dublin school system down here near Columbus, where I am, and in Olentangy schools, where one case an elementary school teacher and the other, the middle school teacher, are having kids stand up and declare their pronouns. Now think about how manipulative and horrific that is. That is in order to respect, I'm guessing, people that are gender confused. It's total propaganda. We have behind the scenes, as part of counseling, an awful lot of school systems have what is called a transgender support plan. We have one in our file from the Kings local school district that's down near Cincinnati, near Kings Island. And that transgender support plan is filled out for the student who has a different, is changing gender or identifying in some other way. And there is an option on that form. Does the parent know about this? And guess what? The standard is becoming that you can withhold this information from parents. Teachers are also influenced by these agendas. We've just had Parma City Schools, the Hilliard-Davidson High School in near Columbus, Columbus City Schools, and Marymount down near Cincinnati have all had homosexual activists training their teachers in professional development. They train them on all the lexicon of homosexual and transgender mythology, which is really what it is. It's a whole worldview that's based on rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And they have all their new pronouns. They're basically told that you're supposed to accept this and you're supposed to affirm. And even one of these activist trainers in Columbus told the teachers, you need to believe a 12-year-old when they tell you their identity. 12-year-olds have this stuff figured out. And she decried something called adultism. And I also heard this in another professional development. Adultism is the new idea that adults know more than children. This is a very bad thing. Just think about where that leads. It's all to child empowerment, separating children from their families. The school is where they're dependent and they make their own decisions. It's extremely scary stuff. So I just put up a couple of these examples on this slide and the next one. Don't go to the next slide yet, but on a couple of examples on the Ohio Department of Education's standards under the self-awareness. Remember, there are 5 competencies on SEL. They have one that says, if you analyze why current events may trigger an emotional reaction and identify ways to regulate a response. Well, how might you regulate your response? If your response isn't favorable, you're supposed to, again, go along. You're supposed to go along and get along, and that's where they want you to be. Self-management competency, one standard for middle school. Apply productive self-monitoring strategies to reframe thoughts and behaviors. What business does the school have to try to reframe my child's thoughts and behaviors? Just teach them science, teach them math, teach them language arts, and move away from this. So any thoughts there, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm going to interject a few things. One is that we have readily available examples of where places in America where this material is further along than we are in Northeast Ohio. There are not many, but there are some. We can look, for instance, and I'm sorry to single them out, but I have to, Baltimore schools, some school districts, some public school districts in Southern California, along Portland, there have been embracing and adopting this material for probably 5 years to a decade sooner than we have become aware of it in Northeast Ohio. We can look at the impact that it's having. I don't know if you've seen, but statistics have been shared recently that the graduating class, I have to air quote that, the graduating class of seniors from some public schools around the Baltimore area have like a 30% literacy rate or lower. I think it's lower than 30%. The average GPA of graduating students is below a 1-point GPA. So you're talking about material that arguably, I believe we can make a clear delineation or clear correlation between the inclusion of this material and degraded academics, which goes right in hand with some of the considerations that are bouncing around in some airheads. I'm going to just watch my language and be nice. So there are some people in Columbus who apparently are considering, again, revamping the rankings, the standards for Ohio K through 12 schools. Right now, we may not know it, but there is some inclusion of rating K through 12 schools in Ohio on standards that are not academic. And there's now talk of moving further in that direction. That's a slippery slope. At what point does it stop? Can we assume that maybe in a few generations we're not paying at all, we're not considering academics at all, that there is no reading, writing, and arithmetic, that schools are based entirely on how much activism they can generate? Like maybe you have bright kids who are graduating, but they're not active enough and they're not embracing social change and justice and those things that, quite frankly, this is a side note, but schools talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity. I say it that way because it makes it form the word DIE, D-I-E. Schools even talking about that is nonsensical because those are things outside of their control. They can't control the diversity. What are they going to become, realtors and start selling different properties? It's nonsense. Last thing I'm going to interject, and that has to do with the state curriculum, the material and what's being driven out of Columbus. Linda, thank you again for going to Columbus and testifying. They're calling it the whole child. And to make fun of it, I've been calling it whole child left behind, taking the terms from the Reagan era, the no child left behind. I call it whole child left behind. But if you look at the graphic on that, and it's up on the State Department of Education website, it's got this circle around the child. It's, wow, ooh, great, we're supposed to be impressed. There's the kid, and there are all these rings around the kid of like the teachers and the academics and the support staff and you know what's number 8 on there in this concentric rings? The parents. Well, apparently, according to this, how this diagram was sketched out by the great brains in Columbus, Ohio, parents are supposed to be number 8 on the list of influencers for children. That tells me a lot about the objective of this terrible nonsense.
Well, that leads right into something I wanted to make sure to say is that these people that I mentioned in the homosexual activist groups that are training teachers in so many, again, Parma, Columbus, Marymount, and Hilliard, and that those are just the ones we know about, all do the same thing about the child who comes and confesses that they are homosexual or that they are gender confused, and they are not have not revealed these concerns and these desires and attractions to their parents, which is where they should, because their parents can guide them and help them to try to overcome them, because no one is born this way. I will have to make sure I always say that no one is born in the wrong sex body or born to be homosexual. And so it's against the science of an anatomy. So they will, lead their student. Probably sometimes they're led into these conversations. There are homosexual clubs in the schools, and often the advisors to those clubs make friends with these kids. Anyway, all of these professional development people that we have seen their material are recommending that this information be withheld from parents if the student requests it. So that if the student is going by a they pronoun, which is, again, nonsensical, doesn't fit with language that we know, it's not logical, but that's what they're doing. If they're going by they at school, they will say to the teacher, make sure when you talk to my parents, you still call me he. That's the kind of thing that, that this is opening the door to. So let's go to the next slide then.
Actually, Linda, 1 second before you move on from that, a really important point that I want to make revolves around the agenda, the objective of this. And it's clear as day. It's written in the whole child left behind thing that's published from the state, the Department of Education. That idea of driving a wedge between the parent and the child is fundamental to the objectives here. And I want to put that in a context that I don't believe is exaggerated or overly fear-inducing, and that is the idea of sexual predators grooming. If you match up the actions being taken right now by teachers and by some staff in schools and put that next to the steps for grooming, for a sexual predator grooming, they're a match. When you talk about, hey kid, come on over here, we're going to have a little secret, you and I, and it's going to have to do with how your sexual gratification and your sexual identity. But we're not going to talk to your mom and dad about that. And that's not all of it, but that's one key element. It's creepy and wrong and disastrous to think that somehow schools are off the hook and we should treat them differently. My point is that if somebody came into your house and lived with you for some period of time and started treating your children this way, your alarm bells would be going off. You'd have red flags all over the place. Don't turn a blind eye to the treatment of children, especially when you're talking about these mixed bathrooms now where boys and girls are together. And we're seeing, from what my perspective, it appears to be a significant uptick in inappropriate sexual advances from teachers to students. Why is the whole idea that there's this pervasive new sexual culture in schools at the same time they're failing is just mind-boggling to me.
So okay, we have one more slide. Let's just go through this pretty quickly, and then maybe we can wrap up with a few comments. So Dan, we'll need to go to the next slide. Okay, so I've just given you just a couple more examples from the Ohio Department of Education's SEL standards. So under the Competency for Social Awareness, high school says demonstrate ways to encourage mutual respect across all settings when viewpoints or perceptions differ. Okay, so let's take the CRT, the very explosive issue. One of the things that was very prevalent, and I think it may be getting some pushback and hopefully some reconsideration, but it looked as though the new working definition of equity is not really equality. It's actually, you should be judging based on skin color. It's not Martin Luther King's, judging people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. No, we actually should be judging. And that means that there's systemic racism, and that there's in the systemic racism category is that law enforcement has been deeply prejudicial to people of color. And so the anti-police sentiment is even expressed in some of the books and the materials that are being presented in school. So your child is supposed to respect that viewpoint. This is opening the door to muting actual dialogue and defending your position with facts in a respectful way, and being able to discuss things with people, even very controversial issues. It's tends to make kids want to go along to get along, is what I think is most kids are going to, that's how they're going to respond. So let's go to the last one. Under the competency of responsible decision-making, as if we weren't teaching children responsible decision-making anyway, as if just the production of your homework and learning through academics doesn't create these competencies anyway. Let's just put all that aside for a second. But here's one: identify factors that can make it hard. I love this. I'm kidding. Make it hard to make the best decisions at home or at school. Oh, okay. I hate my parents. Their rules are so awful. Gives the perfect opening there for children to feel discontent where there was not discontent before. This sows discord. It's like everything else going on. It seems to be trying to help. No, this is not a help. This is not necessary. We don't need to be quizzing these children about every feeling they have and how to manage them all at this point. They need to stick to academics. I've said it a million times. You can learn empathy by reading about noble characters in literature. You can learn empathy by reading about the Holocaust and studying the Holocaust. You can learn leadership skills. It's another thing they want to develop by Public speaking. You can learn goal setting by getting your homework done on time. By virtue of just sticking to academics, most, if not all, of the SEL standards, except the indoctrination, would be solved, and they would not even have to have this as a taking up time and space and money in school systems.
I completely agree. And again, in the realm of, if anyone on the call has read any of my posts on social media, I do like to poke fun at the left. It's just a lot of what they do is just so nonsensical. So my approach to all of this is schools have one job, and that's education. If they're not doing a good job at that one job that they have, they should not be talking about doing other things. And then I always make a point of saying, hint, school districts, it should not be playing doctor with children. So that really puts the spotlight on the inappropriate, creepy behavior behind a lot of what's going on in schools right now. And I want to make a point about resources that are readily available. This notion that somehow some parents seem to have just bought on and they've bought into this nonsense. This notion that if it doesn't happen in the school, that these kids are just going to fall through the cracks and they're in this gray area. Open up a browser and do a search for doctor near you. There are plenty of doctors. We don't need people showing up at the schools, or even worse, people at the schools who were already pulled 1,000 different directions. These teachers who were supposed to be part counselor, part cop, part teacher, part administrator, and then try and add all this social emotional stuff. It's not going to work. The doctors are there. They're in our community. Parents have doctors that they take their children to. I think the schools need to stop. And the reason behind it, I'm just going to tease this out because this is a whole other presentation that could take place. And that's the money behind this. It's happening in schools not only for influence and to try to do social engineering for the next generation of American children, but also it is a moneymaker. There are companies out there like Attorney General Merrick Garland's son-in-law who are making tons of money hand over fist by selling this stuff to school districts. Two other things really quickly for people who are tuning in. If you have a pen handy, or watch the recording of this, go to Ohio Revised Code 3313.60. That's 3313.60. Ohio Revised Code 3313.60. It's about a 5 or 6 page little pamphlet you can print out. It gives the parents, it outlines the rights that parents have in their children's education. And part of that is being able to get access to any materials that are presented to your children. There was some argument recently about whether or not surveys are included in that. They absolutely are. If your kids go into that school or in any connected fashion are getting something put in front of them from their local school district, you as a parent have absolutely every right to gain access to that material, preferably in advance. It really needs to be in advance because if the harm's already done, what good is it? But don't be bashful about that. The last thing on that to segue on that slide is and Linda, maybe you remember it off the top of your head. I was making some notes while we were talking. I don't remember it. There's a law in the books in Ohio that anything taught to children in Ohio must be true. I know that may sound astounding that you have to have such a law in the books because we'd like to assume that truth is taught in schools, but it's actually codified. And I think what I'm going to do as a follow-up, I'll go back to John and Diane Stover because they're just like an encyclopedia of awesome school knowledge. I'll post it after this, and I'll make sure that Bob Frantz knows what I'm pointing to as well, what I'm alluding to. But if you find that it's bad or objectionable, fight it. If it's wrong and you can prove that it's factually incorrect, like the CRT stuff, it's cut to shreds. No historians are jumped that they don't like it because it's nonsense. All it does is selectively manipulate history and carves out all of the prominent good things about America in order to create a narrative, and it's an outrage.
There's one. Go ahead.
No. I was wrapping up. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to say this because you reminded me of something I wanted to bring to everyone's attention because it's a bigger issue. This morning in Columbus on one of our big AM talk shows, the superintendent of the Dublin schools, in Northwest Columbus, who is well known. He left Hilliard, which they are already in a big problem down here. Well known as as a far lefty, frankly, among many of us. He was on this talk show, and he said that this past year, talking about the lockdowns and the masks and the anxiety of children, which never had to happen, and he's talking about the fact that they have doubled the number of counselors in the Dublin school system, and it's a big school system. So, and I'm seeing this all over. You go to these school systems and you go down and look at their staff. There's lots more counselors and social workers. It's to meet this agenda, folks. They want to turn schools into, again, supplement parents. But the other way this is going is towards school-based health clinics. It's been going that way for a long time. Planned Parenthood would love nothing better. The LGBTQ folks would love nothing better. And all these people that want to bypass parental rights about sexuality and gender and all of the privacy issues of kids. They have them already in a few places in Ohio. They want more of them. And this just dovetails beautifully, quote unquote, into that goal.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that we wrap up and take questions because we are approaching 8:45. But before I do that, I do want to say one quick thing to all the parents out there. I had a conversation, I ventured into a conversation with Alex Newman. If you don't know that name, you should look him up. He's a cool cat. Alex Newman, about 4 or 5 years ago, told me to my face that I should take my kids out of public school, that they're a disaster, they're a mess, and fight from the outside. I didn't take that to heart, but I have recently done that, and now it's my turn to fill that role. Think of me what you will. It's my turn to play Alex Newman and suggest that you take your children out of public schools. If you're into the fight, please join, but get your children out of harm's way while we try to fight to reclaim education in Ohio's schools.
Well, if that's going to be the last word of the presentation, Jonathan, it's a strong one, and I concur. I want to, on behalf of everybody who's been watching, not the least of which those of us at CFFS, thank you both for a tremendous presentation. We do have a couple of questions in the window. I'm glad you guys went a little long because we needed to make sure you got it all in. And before I go to that, just super quick, Jonathan, on the end of that, you and I, and Linda, in fact, and Dan, when we had one of our production meetings to prepare for this, we talked about this somewhat, that it's more than just getting your kids out of public schools now and get them out of harm's way, as you say, while we work on this and work on fixing this and having more of a say and an impact in returning schools to education, first and foremost, as you very eloquently pointed out. But it's not, the answer may not be the private schools. Countless numbers, and I hate to say that, but countless numbers of private schools, including many religiously oriented schools, Christian schools and Catholic schools, are going down the same rabbit hole. They're chasing this agenda and saying we have to be with the times if we want to keep our congregants coming and so on and so forth. And so they're doing a lot of this in the private schools too, which brings us to something you've talked about a lot, and that is, the homeschooling co-op model. So do you want to hit that real quick before we talk about the, or get the other questions in from our participants?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can speak now from firsthand experience. We grappled with exactly what to do for our children. We want the best for them. We're very education focused, and we actually took our kids out of a private school, put them into a very highly ranked public school. It was referred to as the public-private, and we're very disappointed. There's just the level of racial antagonism, et cetera. We've moved our kids, and the long and short of it is we, over Thanksgiving break, pulled our kids and we picked curriculum and went to home education. And that process, to say it's been rewarding and amazing is a vast understatement. The resources that are available, the communities around home education are spectacular. Every objection that you hear is complete fallacy. The whole idea that, well, they're not going to socialize and they're not going to be part of society, it's complete and utter nonsense. And our kids can run circles around, I believe any of these homeschool kids are going to run circles around the typical public school education environment, no matter how filler. It's garbage. So kids can get more rest, they can socialize more, they can pick up hobbies and do all sorts of great things. And I'm happy knowing that I'm in this fight, that I'm trying to push back to reclaim education, but that my kids are removed from harm's way while I do it.
And that's a great message, and I know that's what a lot of people are thinking about right now. They're just trying to figure out how to make that happen. How do they put their kids in a situation like yours? But the solutions are out there. They really are. You have to hunt, you have to communicate, you have to coordinate with other parents, talk to other like-minded people who are worried about what their kids are being indoctrinated by, and most importantly, forced to repeat. At the risk of being shunned, of being, cast off, or being an outcast, if you will, and just having their educational experiences ruined because they won't go along with some of this nonsense that has no business in our schools. Find those parents, and I encourage everybody to find those parents, like I said, and coordinate with them and find a way to do things together if that's what it takes. Let's talk about some of the questions here. I'm just going to read these from the Q&A chat window on Zoom here. We've got a few people chiming in. Jonathan, I think you mentioned early on in the presentation about Fairview. The question here is, what is the Fairview Park whistleblower issue? Can you give us more specifics on that?
Oh boy. So yeah, Fairview Park has some major issues, not least of which are parents that are basically, no, not basically. They're parents that are pushing for information and are being ignored. They are going to the district, sending emails, asking questions, and the district is stonewalling them. There's more information that will be released. I know it's been a little bit delayed. I teased it out. I want to say it was almost a week ago, but stay tuned on Fairview Park. We have a treasure trove of whistleblower information that's come to us, and a lot of new information is going to come out, and we already know that there is a robust and growing parent group in Fairview Park who's preparing to act on it.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from Janice, who says, please explain the superintendents and school boards accepting federal ESSER, elementary and secondary school emergency relief, under the ARP, the American Rescue Plan, that pushes social emotional learning, CRT, to reopen schools, $200 billion. They need to be questioned and removed from their positions. There are some schools trying to do this. Olmsted Falls, for example. Linda, do you want to take that one?
Well, I don't know the details. I think she gave the amount of money. Exactly. Parents are not asking enough questions about federal dollars and even state dollars that are going toward this. So I think you just have to ask your local school and just keep asking. Jonathan, you may know more details.
Yeah, well, that's your starting point, is ask And for anybody that is willing to step up and ask your school district, and I don't think you should be bashful one bit about asking about financial concerns relative to your local school district, send an email to the superintendent, and I suggest copying all of the board members. Make it as visible as possible. But beyond that, you should know that I actually have not seen one, but I've seen a lot of talk about the grant application. So there's a grant process that the school has to go through in order to get money. So the school might say, and this is just me paraphrasing my understanding, you may find better or different detail in your local school district, but the school district might find that they have $600,000 that's available through these ESSER funds to safely reopen, and they have to fill out this involved document requesting the money. That document and what they submit is public record. I don't know personally how to find it or where to find it, but I do know many parents who have commented that they've found it and read through it. So they'll see, for instance, like on page 17, it says, the school is committed to doing these 6 things in order to gain access to that $600,000. And you may find some of that is objectionable. But pinning the money to the action is a big part of arming yourself with the information to fight back.
Let me just add can I add one thing to that?
Sure, go ahead.
You can go, if you're a research wonk, you can go to the federal website and then, of course, the state of Ohio and go backwards and see where the money has been allocated under the different school systems. Sometimes it's a pass-through through the State Department of Education. Sometimes it's directly to the school systems. But if you just type in all the code words and go to the bill and the grant through the Federal Department of Education, they will have to list the grantees. So, and then you go backwards and you say, I hear you got X amount of money. What are you using it for?
That's a great point. That's a great way to ask it. I'm going to ask this question from Bill. It's more of a statement, and I'll let you both respond to it. I believe it is important to force First Amendment confrontations in the schools in order to test the limits of dissent. This is not easy to do because it puts a lot on our students, but it is important to challenge the stranglehold that progressive educators have, and if necessary, take them to federal court. Dissent may include respectfully disagreeing with and criticizing the morality of the LGBTQ lifestyle, and even refusing to use the preferred gender pronouns, which amounts to acquiescing to gender fluidity philosophy. And I just, real quick to dovetail on that before you speak to it, Linda, you can go back to you first on this. That's what makes this in large part a free speech issue. Some people may say, what does Citizens for Free Speech have to do with all of this stuff in the schools? And it's so important. So many of the issues you have covered in this great presentation literally affect our kids' rights to express themselves how they wish, without being forced and compelled to say things that they don't want to say, such as referring to a biological boy as a biological girl, vice versa, pronouns, and so on and so forth. They're being forced to do and say things they don't want to say, and that is just as much of a violation of free speech as suppressing or censoring others. So, Linda, did you want to take a shot at that one real quick?
I could talk about this for hours because this is what I write and speak about so often. The issue of kids standing up in class and being forced to declare their pronouns. The one middle school girl came home in tears, to her mom, and that's how she reported it to her. And I thought to myself, we have to prepare our kids, and your child, who's going to be able to withstand the heat that's going to come with this. But some of these kids need to stand up and say, sorry, I'm not doing that. The other thing that comes up is that I was told, again, in the Hilliard schools, here, this is a Columbus suburb, that there are teachers that have been called to the principal's office in one of the high schools and forced to apologize because they used the wrong name or pronoun for a student. And in some cases, the parents even had to be called and apologize to the parents. This is humiliating to teachers. This is coercion. There's how many ways do we talk about how that is? So you've got teachers who are also, they're going to be risking their jobs, and some already have. There's a couple of national cases out there. but to be able to stand up for their free speech rights. But it needs to be done, and I think it's coming. People are fed up with this.
Jonathan?
I completely agree. We were talking 10, 15 years ago about the politically correct speech. And if nothing else, even if people are moderately okay with the suppression of in the whole movement toward political correct, just remember this: it killed all the comedians. Comedians can't be funny anymore because the politically correct killed them all. But there's a whole. I'm with Linda on this one. The idea of compelled speech is maybe even scarier than suppressed speech and not having freedom of speech. Jordan Peterson did a great thing on that. That's what kind of pushed him into fame in Canada, pushing back, saying, no, you can't tell me what I have to say. You can tell me that I can't say things. I can't shout fire in a crowded theater, but you can't tell me what I have to say. But I want to add to something Linda said, and that is the school administrators. School administrators need to come around on this thing as well, because it's not enough if the student is willing to go in and say, hey, I disagree with you because fill in the blank. You know, my family values are different or something. That's fine if you want to do your thing, but you can't compel me to do this thing. It's a dead end when the school administrators don't back up the kids and don't understand free speech and those types of issues. And there's a great example I was made aware of a young girl who was Christian, who was, got in all kinds of trouble for drawing she had a cross on her, the cross on a necklace around her neck. And that led to all sorts of, people said they felt intimidated and all sorts of nonsense, and that they go into the office. This is an example, and it's endemic in these school districts. They call in the parents, and then lawyers are involved and all that stuff. And this one girl's like, she's traumatized by the sight of this girl's cross on her necklace and everything. And eventually the school administrators got to the point where they just said, hey, we realize that there's not really an infraction here. There's not a major issue, but we can't back down, and we can't. They ended up putting the girl on like 3 days of in-school suspension or something, having to do with the cross or on her jewelry. And the school, the administrators are saying, well, our hands are tied because we need to save face on this issue.
Yeah. It's simply shameful, and it is exactly, again, thank you for the example of why this is a CFFS issue, why we're addressing this at Citizens for Free Speech. The First Amendment clearly protects religion and your right to practice it. And that means you cannot have it, you can't force it on anybody, but simply wearing a cross obviously does not do that. A whole bunch of questions came in here because people are prompted by other people's questions. We don't have a ton of time here. In fact, we're supposed to be done in a minute. We like to end these at 9 o'clock. However, since we started late with all of the tech gremlins stopping us from getting zoomed up the way we wanted to be, we'll go a couple more minutes here before I close. And I do have some information, by the way, when we're done with the Q&A about the next webinar and a couple of other events. But Jonathan and Linda, maybe we'll close with this one. Daniel wants you to address the talking points of CRT not being taught in schools. This is something that we heard, and obviously the Virginia gubernatorial race, which became very much a hot button issue, along with the gender queer theory and all of the other things with the bathrooms and the father whose daughter was attacked. The CRT thing, those on the progressive side, including the candidate who lost, said, what are you talking about? CRT isn't being taught here. Show me in the curriculum where it teaches CRT, critical race theory. And Linda, they're very good at masking this. They won't list it as such. They'll just teach all of the tenets associated with it that bring it about without putting it by name in the curriculum. But do you want to hit that real quick?
Well, I've written an article. It's a position paper that's on my missionamerica.com website, all about CRT. Yes, it is being taught in our schools. It's yes, you said it exactly right, Bob. They don't say, now we're going to have a lesson on critical race theory. No, it's so I phrase it as CRT influenced lessons. And then I give a whole bunch of examples, many of which are right here in Ohio. And so, yes, definitely the Black Lives Matter movement, not that phrase, but the organization and the movement and their terrible goals that are anti-American, anti-police, pro-racism, they are influencing this, and they are based on critical race theory. So they're everywhere. So go to our website, missionamerica.com. You'll find a quite long, and it's a lot of bullet points, so it should be easy to get through.
Jonathan, last thought on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to read from this note that my lovely wife, Tiffany, came up with this comment. CRT in practice is just as wrong as academic classes. It really, that hits the nail on the head. And I'm going to put that in sort of a little funnier context. I had siblings, and we used to beat up on each other. And so we used to drive my parents absolutely bonkers crazy, because one of us would hit the other one, and whatever word my parents said, don't punch your brother, we would make up another word and say, I didn't punch him, I bopped him. And then next time we'd like hit your sister, don't bop your sister. No, it was a flick. I didn't bop her, I flicked my sister. And it was this constant game of evasion. And we were just, at the end of the day, she didn't care what it was a bad thing, and she was trying to get rid of it. So it's complete and utter nonsense. These schools like, oh yeah, we're not teaching it because you won't see it spelled out. Well, it's the same thing under a different name.
Very well said. And I'm sure Mom eventually got around to keep your hands to yourself. How about that? That's a good way to cover it all. And that's
Yes.
our message to these educators who are not educating but indoctrinating. Keep your theory to yourself. Teach my kids reading, writing, arithmetic, and science, and so forth, and the rest of it is up to us. That's the parental role. So Jonathan Broadbent, Protecting Ohio Children Coalition, LindaHarvey, Mission America, and also Protecting Ohio. Terrific presentation. I want to say thank you both. We could go on, and you both know this, for hours, but we are going to call it a webinar now, at least for the presentation part. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now so that I can give you the rest of the information that you need to have. So Dan, if you can green light that.